After a brief synopsis of what occurred in the previous seasons, at last we begin the final season of The Bad Batch. As the first episode kicks off, we get yet another glance at the callous and unmerciful nature of Dr. Hemlock, as he disregards the safety of TK troopers as their Imperial shuttle crashes past the perimeter of Mount Tantiss. He believes sending out reinforcements to recover them is fruitless as they are in the territory of dangerous creatures while past the defensive perimeter. The scene cuts to Omega inside of her cell as she stares out the cell window to the mountains beyond, until the arrival of Emery Carr, that is. Following the same routine day in and day out, Omega helps Emery collect the blood samples of numerous clones, including Omega's own. This is all for the purpose of discovering a clone with the adequate DNA for Hemlock's experiment under Emperor Palpatine, Project Necromancer. On this topic, we witness Nalase dispose of the vials containing Omega's blood in order to protect her from being discovered as the clone needed for the Empire's plan, much like she did in Season 1, though under different circumstances. During said routine, Omega also visits Crosshair from time to time, discussing with him the potential and eventual escape plan, despite him feeling as though there is no hope. In addition, Omega also tends to the Lurka hounds by feeding them daily, even befriending and domesticating one herself, one she names Batcher. Something to note is the fact that Omega steals some of the hay in the hound holding facility each day to construct a doll of sorts to keep her company during the lonely hours in her cell. During her conversations with Crosshair, Crosshair divulges his previous attempt at escape, part of the reason for his hopelessness, and says that if he had another chance at fleeing, he wouldn't think twice about leaving Omega behind, stating that he isn't like the other members of Clone Force 99. However, Omega would debunk this and says that he's her brother, doubting that he would actually leave without her. She also tells him that as soon as she comes up with a plan, they'll both be escaping, saying that perhaps Emery could assist them. Crosshair tells her that she trusts too easily and that not every clone is their ally, though Omega would tell him that perhaps he doesn't trust enough. I think this statement really embodies Crosshair's character, as he believes that he doesn't really belong anywhere at this point after feeling betrayed by both his family in the Bad Batch as well as by the Empire. Though I will say that I think he's slowly realizing that perhaps the Empire never actually cared for him, and the Bad Batch really does, and that leaving him on Kamino during the events of Season 1 was not intentional nor malicious. Nevertheless, we see that Crosshair's hands tremble after Omega says this, not only due to what I mentioned a moment ago, but also potentially as a side effect weakening him after all the tests and attempts at reconditioning him by the Empire. Omega actually points this out in episode 3, concerned with Crosshair's current state and well-being, though he would shrug it off and tell her that it's nothing. Some time passes as we transition to another phase of the episode where Omega's hair is a little longer and her face is slightly older looking, likely several months later. In fact, I would say that she looks a little more like Emery, even displaying a similar hairstyle. Following the very same schedule, Omega continues completing her daily chores and becomes marginally more accustomed to her new life. However, after noticing that the Lurka hound she befriended is injured and set to be terminated, Omega would destroy the droid in charge of the kennel and set free her new friend, who unsurprisingly comes to Omega's aid later on. Hemlock would warn Omega about disobedience, stating that despite not being able to harm her, otherwise Nalase would cease compliance, he can harm Crosshair, who Omega of course greatly cares for. As Omega is brought back to her cell by Emery on the order of Hemlock, Omega tells Emery to leave her, clearly upset at her sister's seeming lack of care. Though even as Emery complies with her wish, she leaves behind the doll Omega created earlier after taking it away from her, showing some amount of care for her sister and fellow clone. Moving on, the next episode begins in the palace of Issa Durand, where the captain of the Durand Guard is questioned on his loyalty, with Roland Durand, the son of Issa, stating that the former captain's accomplices have already stated the truth after their capture. He is disposed of by Issa Durand after she states that he is guilty of conspiracy against the family, and the next person on trial enters, a member of the Pike Syndicate captured by none other than the Bad Batch. Issa Durand states that the two mercenaries in Hunter and Wrecker would be dead if her son Roland hadn't told her to consider their offer. Hunter tosses Roland the horn that was cut off his head by the Pikes in Season 1, and they make their trade. The Pike, one of those who disgraced the Durand family, for information regarding the speculated whereabouts of Hemlock's secret facility. With this lead, Hunter and Wrecker set off to a jungle world housing what is presumably Hemlock's old lab that was destroyed after the Empire rained down fire upon the planet via orbital bombardment. Something important to note is that before departing, Hemlock would leave behind one of his experiments in the form of a creature with long tentacles and a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth. This creature looks like a mutated Vixis from the planet Umbara, and reminds me of the Kraken from Pirates of the Caribbean. Nonetheless, the two would discover a pair of clone cadets left behind to survive after they escaped the aforementioned abandoned facility. But before we continue, I do want to mention something I found interesting. As the batch land on the planet, Wrecker states that it smells like a rancid Jotaz, a creature we know of from Jedi Fallen Order. I think it's cool we get a mention of the creature in a show. Moving onward, as the two clone cadets take Hunter and Wrecker to a third cadet at their camp, Wrecker carelessly touches a vine that turns out to be a tentacle, despite being told not to touch anything in classic Wrecker fashion, though they manage to keep the beast at bay and eventually arrive at the camp. After telling the cadets about Omega and their mission to retrieve her, the third cadet named Mox informs them that he didn't see any girl, but knew Hemlock was in charge, confirming the ruins of the base did belong to Hemlock, while also confirming to Clone Force 99 that there was another facility housing Omega. In addition, the cadets tell Hunter and Wrecker that one of the control room panels in the base was intact during their last reconnaissance. However, it required power to function, as well as the fact that the base was covered in slither vines. After retrieving Gonki, the batch's Gong series power droid, they head to the ruins and plug into the panel with the help of the only cadet that would aid them. But they would find that they were not alone, as one of the aforementioned slither vines, and a large one at that, began its attack. In the meantime, the other two cadets would board the Marauder with the intention of leaving the others behind for their freedom, though guilt would get to them after seeing Omega's room and doll and receiving a distress call from their fellow cadet and brother. With that, they head to the wrecked facility and bomb the creature from above after throwing down cables for the others to get up, leaving the planet behind with what information they could. Hunter decides on planning to take the three cadets to Pabu, while also discovering that Hemlock transferred his base of operations to another location, with only a sector being listed. With this new lead, Hunter and Wrecker plan on retrieving Omega and Crosshair as soon as possible, who, speaking of, continue their routine at Mount Tantiss as we transition into episode 3. As Emery takes Omega's blood sample after she is put in charge of the lab by Hemlock, who prepares to greet an unexpected guest, Nala Se silently tells Omega that today is the day she must escape, as not only is Nala Se unable to hide or dispose of Omega's blood sample this time as she is accompanying Hemlock, but Hemlock's attention will be elsewhere. On Nala Se's orders, Omega steals her datapad and heads to Crosshair's cell, where she helps him escape after he distracts two TK troopers. Concurrently, Hemlock and Nala Se proceed to the landing platform to greet the arriving Emperor Palpatine.
I have been most eager to see the progress you have made, Doctor. It is imperative that we secure the future of this empire.
Hemlock and Palpatine discuss the progress on Project Necromancer, and Palpatine strongly advises Hemlock to keep the facility on Tantiss a complete secret, as word of Hemlock's heinous experiments reaching the Senate and even the ears of other Imperials would result in Hemlock likely being arrested. It should be worth mentioning that Palpatine is of course completely okay with Hemlock's experiments, as he deems them a great asset to the Empire, which is why he urges the secrecy of the lab. As Crosshair and Omega head to the Hound containment unit of the facility, Emery discovers them attempting to escape through the open Hound gate that formerly belonged to the Lurka Hound previously befriended by Omega. As Omega tries to persuade a stubborn Emery, Crosshair would stun Emery before him and Omega continue with their escape, heading to the crash shuttle I mentioned earlier from episode 1. However, Emery had already alerted Hemlock and the clone commandos, who, along with TK troopers, head toward the shuttle's location. As Crosshair and Omega fail to utilize the vessel's communication array to reach Hunter and Wrecker, they hijack the shuttle used by the arriving troopers, who are taken down by Omega and Crosshair, along with the help of the Lurka Hound named Batcher. The Hound set loose by Hemlock also unintentionally aid Omega and Crosshair as they attack and distract another creature the two run into. I really enjoyed how Crosshair gets a little friendlier with Omega, as before they hijack the ship, as I said earlier, he asks her if the batch taught her plans MD2, to which she replies that they did, as Tech had her memorize every plan, and Crosshair responds with a jesting, of course he did. At this point, I'm not even certain if Crosshair is aware of Tech's death, and I presume Omega said nothing as to save it for a more peaceful time where they're not being hunted. As Emery discovers that the blood sample belonging to Omega tested positive for the results they were looking for, she informs Hemlock of this revelation, resulting in Hemlock calling off the fighters, allowing for Crosshair and Omega to jump into hyperspace and escape. Hemlock states that with the full backing of the Empire, he will do anything to reacquire Omega in order to use her blood for his experiments, particularly Project Necromancer. It's cool we get to see a glimpse of the mysterious assassin we saw in the trailer, a being with many theories surrounding them. Anyhow, that's it for this week's breakdown, with the first 3 episodes covered. I hope you enjoyed, and I'm pretty hyped for next week's episode. Have a great day. See ya.